Ashwood, Manidog, Ugina Sukawawan, Kishia Manidog.
So when you walk into Canada History Hall, we have a creation story, which is the first thing that you see. And on one of the signs over here, we're talking about the vital presence of the First Nations people, and that they weren't the first immigrants, yet they were the first peoples on this land. And that I think it's very important that the Museum of History is recognizing that as soon as you walk into the Canada History Hall. Now, as you continue through, the museum depicts what the lives would have been for different Indigenous peoples. Now it talks about what it would have been like for the people that lived in the prairies, the people in the Maritimes, then it moves into the Great Northern Forests, and of course the Arctic as well. And the museum kind of depicts what it would be like for the people living in these different areas, the tools they had, what they made do with, and essentially how they lived on the land at this time. First contact with Europeans, and as we're coming into this section now, we're able to take a look and see what it was like for the Indigenous people to have that first contact, and of course we're given a perspective of the Europeans as well. So we have made contact with Europeans, and the common thread that I'm seeing throughout here right now is that contact was not necessarily peaceful, and this is kind of what this section is sort of depicting right now. So it's going to be interesting to see what kind of perspectives are given here. So when considering European contact, we're looking at this idea of both French and English and what it was like for them as they were exploring and trying to find passages to Asia, what it was like to come across what is now known as Canada. So far in terms of perspective, it seems fairly balanced. I mean, we're getting a sense of what it was like for the Indigenous people to have European contact. We're also getting a sense of what it was like for the Europeans, the French and the English, as they were trying to find a passage to Asia, essentially. So it's kind of interesting in terms of perspective. It seems better than I expected, maybe? So we have a whole little nook over here about Samuel de Champlain and kind of the man myth and the legend that he was. So this is kind of interesting in terms of what he did and how he essentially was a huge part of the colonization. Take back my opinion actually on perspective, and I think that it's actually showing the Indigenous perspective very well. I think that we're getting the sense of what life was like for the Indigenous people that had to deal with so much after first contact, and in terms of disease and sickness and war and political upheaval and all sorts. I actually think the perspective that the museum is shedding is actually really good. I think what I am enjoying thus far is the fact that although, yes, the history is the history and it's written the way it is with European contact and then essentially them colonizing and taking over, what I enjoy is the fact that the museum is not belittling or making small the history of the Indigenous people that were here before. And I think that that's really important. So I like the way that it is being depicted thus far. So as we move into this section here, we're looking at British North America and how following the British conquest of Canada, France ceded nearly all of their land to the North American possessions, to the victorious British, and the new British rulers now and the former French subjects had to adjust to these new realities, and they achieved this kind of uneasy accommodation that has really sort of endured currently and up into the present. So that's what this is looking at. Right now I'm in this section that is talking sort of about the birth of the Métis people, and and basically kind of how there was a few different cultures, being these European cultures and these indigenous cultures kind of being sewn together, and that's what we're looking at here. I don't feel like it's lacking information, but it's hard to digest everything, and it's hard to really pick apart kind of how I'm feeling about everything, if that makes sense. I'm still trying to decide how I feel about perspectives and whatnot, and I'm thinking it's balanced, but then again, I have these moments where I'm like, so I don't know. I'm not being the best narrator here because I have a lot of I don't know feelings. So in this section here, we're looking at essentially the creation of the railway and Sir John A. Macdonald's role in essentially piecing together the railroad that would connect to Canada. I do have one important question, however. While I do think, and I'm going to go with my belief here, that I think the perspectives are well balanced, I haven't seen anything about residential schools yet, and that concerns me. Either I've missed it and it's so small that it just touched on, or it doesn't exist, and I'm going to continue looking for that. But that is something that I feel like if it's not present, then the perspective is completely, my opinion on the perspective being good is just out the window, garbage, goodbye. So after you come out of that section with the Great Depression, you look at World War II, and then the men all coming home from war, and then the post-war prosperity and growth. So that is sort of what this section looks like when discussing the history of Canada. And then it seems to kind of go into pop culture, so what was popular in the 50s and the 60s and moving forward. So we kind of take this turn into, I would say, a take on pop culture in Canada's history. So behind me we have the Canadian Constitution and we have Terry Fox, except again, I haven't seen anything on residential schools and I'm starting to feel a little disheartened by that. Okay, I can breathe. Thankfully, there is an entire section on the injustices of residential schools, and it tells stories of children with the terrible, terrible things that happened. So I'm thankful that the museum is also looking at the ugly parts of Canadian history as well, where there is a lot of ugly, and I'm glad that they're taking that seriously and looking at that as well. as someone who is still obviously a learner and learning about history and putting together history, I think that the museum does a really good job in showing various perspectives and making voices heard. So all in all, I enjoyed myself. I thought it was really well done, and I give props to the museum curators for putting together something that I think offers a well-balanced perspective. Hello, this is Post-Museum Abby here. Now, in terms of picking an actual artifact, one thing, and talking about it, almost felt impossible. And I say that because it was kind of overwhelming, and I do believe I mentioned that in my little video you just watched about how overwhelming it kind of is, the just amount of pure artifacts that are there. But, however, the one thing that did affect me the most, or the one thing that really impacted me, was the entire place, the entire space about residential schools. And so, as a teacher, a learning teacher, learning about residential schools, I've been really impacted by what I've learned in the last little while. And I want to be able to talk about residential schools open and freely to my students. And so I think being able to see an exhibit like that with various artifacts, the one that really stood out to me was there was a jacket that a little girl was wearing, and it was obviously made of some kind of animal hide, and she was wearing it in a photo, and then they actually had the hide in the museum. And I just thought that was really powerful, because that was something that would have been made at home, and then when she went to the residential school, she was no longer allowed to wear that. So I don't know, like I said, I felt very overwhelmed by the sheer amount of things, but nonetheless, I learned a lot, and each artifact and everything in there has, I think, way more significance and way more history than I feel even humanly possible to dive into in a short museum visit. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed my whole kind of little tour. I really wanted to bring you along because I really felt like it was going to be important. It was important to me to sort of see how the perspective came together. And the last thing I want to say, as I was kind of going through and I kept saying, I'm disappointed because I haven't seen anything at residential schools yet, and I just want to make sure that's touched on, blah, blah, blah. I think that it being so close to the end, that could be argued a good thing or a bad thing. I think it's okay. It could be a bad thing because people may see it as a last thought or something that was just kind of added in. But I don't know, I think it's good that it's there kind of close to the end, because it's showing that not only has this been an issue that happened in the past, but now as we work towards reconciliation, this is the present, and people are still feeling the trauma from events years and years and years ago. So anyway, enough of me rambling. I hope you've enjoyed. This is probably a very long video now, and I'm sorry for that. So if you're still here, congratulations, you've dealt with me for long enough. So anyway, thank you for watching. Adios.